Good afternoon. I'm going to get started. Thank you so much for joining me today. Welcome to the fifth in the Becoming a Better Tutor series. This session is on self-reflection. The series is hosted by TPAPT, which is a national nonprofit association of over 10,000 independent tutors, local owner-operators, and test prep professionals. Our mission is to empower independent education and to improve student access to high-quality local tutoring and test prep. I'm excited to talk about self-reflection because it's something that is so important, but is so easily skipped over or forgotten as we go through our busy lives. And I'll be talking a little bit about self-reflection for our students, but also how we as tutors can use it. If you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat as we go. But I will have some time at the end set aside so that you can ask anything that you'd like. I'm Robin Sadie, TPAPT board member and associate director of tutor training. I'm also the author of 28 ACT science lessons and TPAPT's own ACT science for tutors and ACT English for tutors. I'm also a spouse, parent, Pokemon expert, and former competitive tap dancer. Today, we'll be talking about what self-reflection is, why it's so important, and some of the evidence backing it up, how to encourage self-reflection for students, how we can use self-reflection in test prep specifically, self-reflection for tutors, and then some time to ask any questions that you have. First, what is self-reflection? In short, it's looking back on past learning experiences, but it includes things like thinking about what a student did to learn. What actions did they take that resulted in successful learning? It also includes exploring connections between content taught and content learned. How much did they learn? How well did they learn? And then evaluate strategies used that the student used in their work, in their studying, in their organization, and in every aspect of their academic life. Why do we care so much about self-reflection? It can lead to thoughtful deliberation about past behavior and actions. And this is helpful because it can then help inform students' future behavior and actions. If they take the time to really think about what they did, what worked, what didn't work, what got them to better test scores or what got them more confidence compared to what didn't and what made them feel frustrated or unsuccessful, they are more likely to consider those when they make future decisions. Self-reflection also leads to better academic achievement, better learning, and then better retention of what they've learned. And a lot of these are supported in many studies that have been done. It can also help students develop procedural understanding how they work through problems, how they can do their work even when it gets hard, how they can work through frustration, how they can move between different strategies, which can help them develop some of the ideas that we've talked about in the past in this series, like improving their productive struggle, improving students' perseverance, their tolerance for challenge, but also their ability to understand how the work gets done, how they learn, and how they work through really tough stuff so that they can build their tolerance for challenging work and for learning more new things and taking academic risks. It also helps them develop growth mindset, which is the idea that the brain can grow, students can learn things. They're not just born with all of their strengths and weaknesses that they're going to have for their whole lives. So here are some ways that you can work self-reflection into your practice. You can include self-reflection during a tutoring session or after a tutoring session or in other ways that you interact with the students. During the session, you can help students self-reflect by giving them specific praise rather than just saying, good job, or you got the question right. Give them a little bit more specific information about what they did right or how they did it right. Maybe they used a good strategy. Maybe they recalled a fact that they learned previously. Maybe they, used a really good test taking strategy. It could be something like, I like the way you use process of elimination to find the right answer, even though you weren't sure of it. Or you did a better job at remembering the formula this time, last time you forgot. Not just you got the question right, great job, let's move on, but you got that question because you identified that it was a question about triangles and then remembered that you knew that all the angles in a triangle add up to 180 degrees. If you give them that specific praise, you're encouraging them to then evaluate their own work in a similar way. Maybe next time they might say, oh, I got that question because I did this, this, and this, so that next time when they get stuck on a question, they can go back and remember what worked for them, what strategies worked. You can also model self-reflection on your own. Talk about the mistakes you made or the things you did great. I missed that the first time I did this question, so now I remember to annotate the question better and circle as I go so I don't mix up the information. Or, I did this, then that. First, I identified that this was asking about semicolons, and then I remembered my semicolon rule, and I used that to be able to identify the correct punctuation in this particular sentence. Not only are you explaining in more detail what a student needs to do in the process, but you're also modeling the process of reflecting on how you went about answering the question. Because again, even though right and wrong is all that's going to get the score at the end of the day, this helps students work through that process so they're better able to implement it in the future. And then things like, I could have done this better by. Sometimes students get stuck in that they can answer all the questions, but maybe not quickly enough, or maybe they can answer most of the questions in a certain content area, but they're getting stuck on some of the trickier ones or on some particular type of question. And so being able to talk about how you might have improved on your own helps students understand that they can also reflect on how they can improve, even if they've gotten it right. This is really helpful, especially when time is limited and students can say, I got that right, I got the right answer, but maybe if I had done it this way instead, or had skipped that, or even not taken the time to go back and double check my own work because I was feeling anxious about this, I could have gotten to more questions at the end. And in addition, you can also prompt the students to have them do the reflecting on their own. Something like, what did you do well there? Not just, I got it right, great, but I picked the right strategy, or even though I got the question wrong, I eliminated a couple of the wrong answer choices, which improved my odds and helped show progress. You can ask, what could you have done instead? This can help students catch some of their mistakes and let them do the work of figuring out what mistakes they made and then how to solve that mistake. So that in the future, if they find themselves in a similar position, similar sort of question or similar strategy needed, they might be able to do the troubleshooting on their own instead of needing you to be there or being completely stumped on a test. Or you can ask something like, what did you get out of that? If you're learning, if students are learning something, if you're teaching them a new concept or they've learned something new in school, just being able to reflect on what they learned can help them recall the information, can help them retain it a little better. Plus, it's a little bit extra review, and it's setting the routine of reflecting on what they've learned. If you're working with students in groups, there are some fun ideas for encouraging self-reflection in ways that normalize making mistakes, sharing ideas for improvement, giving and receiving feedback, but also can make it more fun. I love snowball reflection activities. You can have students each write an idea, something they learned or something that they can do to improve or something they need to do better next time. Write it on a piece of paper, crumple up a piece of paper, and have a little snowball fight as much as you think is practical or fun or before it gets out of hand. And then the students can each pick up a snowball and read it to the class. And that way students are up and moving. So it's a fun brain break. It's a nice way to get out some extra energy, but it also allows students to share reflection in a little bit of a lower stakes situation because they're not reading their own, it's anonymous. So we get the ideas, we get the thoughts on how students can do better, but they don't have to share something personal and themselves. It's anonymous. So, everyone gets a chance to share without necessarily sharing something personal about themselves. You can also do collaborative reflection. Students can work together to think, what could we have done better as a group or as individuals, so that students are sort of thinking through multiple ideas, thinking about what might be the best piece of feedback or the best reflection to then share out as a group. You can have students reflect with a partner, and that can look like giving each other feedback, or even just sharing their own reflections with each other. It can feel a little more comfortable than sharing with a whole group, but it also allows students to hear more types of reflection or more thoughts, more kinds of feedback than they would individually. Another way to encourage reflection is to have students grade their own work or grade each other's work. And this might depend on the culture that you have in your classroom space. But grading other students can help individuals feel ownership over the scoring and the testing process, because standardized testing can feel a little bit overwhelming. It also allows students to start seeing patterns and notice, oh, this student also got the same question wrong for the same reason, picked the same wrong answer. So that must be like a really common thing. Let's think about this. And it gets students to start thinking a little bit more big picture than just what's the one question that they're looking at right now. You can also encourage self-reflection after your tutoring sessions. And this will help continue the process, but you're also building the habits that will help students reflect after classes, after tests, and after other things that happen in their lives. You're also making good use of their time so that they come into the next session with everything sorted out, or as much sorted out regarding the content and strategies and mindset as they possibly can. You can have students do written reflections after a session. You can give them sentence starters, like one thing I learned is, or one thing I need to remember to do next time is. Sentence starters help not only by telling the student what they need to write in that moment, or getting them started without giving them the exact words, so they still have to think through it, but they're given a direction. It also helps create that habit so that next time they may not even need the sentence starters. Maybe next time they'll be sitting in their math class looking through a test that they just got back and automatically start doing that reflection on their own. So they get the benefits of better learning, better retention, better habits, building good mindsets without having to write it down next time. You can also encourage open-ended journaling. Some students benefit from just thinking, writing on paper, anything about the session. What are their thoughts? You can learn a lot about the students this way, but the students can also learn a whole lot about themselves in the process this way. You can have students build a portfolio or track their learning. You can have a Word doc or a spreadsheet that you can share with a student if you'd like, where they can keep track of what they've learned. This is helpful for engaging in the self-reflection process, but it also has added benefits of reminding them what they've learned. They can keep coming back to it. They keep getting to see all that they've learned. It can help them feel successful, like they've accomplished something, help them build that growth mindset and understand that even if they don't know something at one point, they may learn it in the future. Building a portfolio is less for test prep and more for academic courses. A student can keep track of things that they did really well or areas they've showed growth to remind them that they can do really well and they can show growth, because it doesn't always feel that way. And being able to remind them of that on a regular basis can help them get through their struggles. And then exit slips are a good and quick way to reflect on what students learned. Short assignment at the end of a session, maybe reviewing the content you covered, maybe reviewing some strategies, maybe some practice questions that refer to some content you've talked about in past sessions as a quick review. But it's a good way to just sort of check in. It's a little bit less open-ended, but it gives students a chance to show what they know, what they took away from it, what they're thinking, but also look back on what they've learned and reflect on what they've taken away from a session. You can also have students reflect in the form of a discussion. If a student is not going to do a written reflection, or they don't have time, or if you just want to add a little interaction at the end before you split, talking a little bit about what you've done, having the student do a brief reflection can have the student walk away feeling like they've learned something. This is helpful because they feel more successful. They feel like they've accomplished something. It's also helpful so that when their parents ask them later, what did you learn in tutoring today? Or what did you do today? They're less likely to shrug and say, I don't know, because that doesn't make us look good, even if we did a really good job. So you can ask a student at the end of the session, what did you learn today? What did we cover today? Or you can ask them more process-based, what did you do well? Have a student think about what actions they took that helped them be successful in this particular session, to keep those ideas fresh, help them feel better about it, and have them be more likely to use those strategies, those techniques, make those actions in the future. It also is helpful for them feeling a little bit more accomplished if, maybe you've ended on a tough, frustrating topic that they don't seem to be getting when the time's up. You can also ask something like, what are you going to remember for next time? That's a little bit more friendly and productive way of asking, what'd you do wrong? What'd you miss? But also has students walk away with an idea of specifically what can they do, so that hopefully they're more likely to do the next practice test or start the next session with that idea fresher in their head, so they're ready to use it. Now, how can we use self-reflection specifically in test prep to help do better on, to help students do better on standardized tests? A lot of us work in standardized testing, SAT, ACT, sometimes other tests, Regents or SHSAT. And self-reflection can be really, really helpful for students who are trying to improve their test scores. They can use self-reflection while they're taking a test, and that can be really, really helpful. If you encourage students to do scheduled check-ins, it can help not only with test anxiety, with having them see, oh, I'm feeling really good about this. Cool, let's make sure I don't go too fast. Or I'm feeling pretty anxious now. Maybe I need to stop and take a couple of slow, deep breaths before I keep going so that I'm at my best. Scheduling the check-ins during the test help students remember to do them, so they don't get to the end of the test and realize, oops, I was supposed to check in with myself. Or have a student go through 10 questions and realize that their head was all wrapped up in anxiety and they were not focusing, they were not doing their best. You can also have students annotate questions. It has them thinking about how they're thinking. This is going to help with making decisions about how to move forward in the future, preparing for the tests, but also over the course of their test. If you have a student mark off all the questions that they guessed on, it's helpful when looking back over the test later. It also gives the students an idea of how much are they guessing and how much are they feeling confident about. If you have a student mark off questions that they're unsure about, that can be helpful in the same way, but you're also helping them understand, oh, hey, when you're unsure about something, turns out you get it right most of the time. So even if you circle it, you don't have to worry too much if you run out of time to go back to it. Or when I see that you're unsure, you tend to have made this error or done this, and you're better able to figure out what they can do, and you have them identifying what they can do or when they need to go back and double check. Having a student go back and double check on every question is not going to be very effective, but having them know what it feels like when they need to go back and double check or try a new strategy or do something else can be really helpful. Similarly, having them mark off when they're rushed can help students understand. If a student is marking off questions where they feel rushed, but they're getting the questions right anyway, maybe they can adjust their time management strategy to move at a faster pace the whole time, because working rushed doesn't seem to affect their score, or vice versa. If a student, when they're rushed, tends to miss all of the questions that they do when they're feeling rushed, they may find that if they're running short on time, they're going to get more points if they only answer 3 of the last 10 questions instead of trying to rush through all of them. And showing them that and having that data to back up your test prep strategy advice can help the student understand it and help the student tweak their strategies as they go. You can also encourage self-reflection after they've taken a test. This can be really helpful in, again, developing the mindsets, making sure that they're learning, having them work through challenges and figure out the patterns that will help them work better in the future, but also helpful for planning your sessions. You can have students do reflections and send them to you afterwards so that you can look at it and get an idea of what did they think about it? How did they feel about time management? How do they feel about this particular topic or this particular passage? You can have them annotate questions after the fact. When they're going through, have them mark off, oh, this one I missed because I forgot a fact or a rule or a detail, or have them mark off all of the questions that had to do with punctuation marks that they got wrong, or mark off all the questions they got wrong that had to do with geometry. And that can help them start to focus what they need to work on in the future, and then how to identify as they're going in real time which questions they're expecting to find more. You can also have students keep an error log. That way, as they go through questions they've missed and move on, it's not forgotten. It's there on paper. You can start to see patterns. They can start to see patterns. And you can have them start to see growth as the errors become less and less, or of different types. You may find that students still get the same number of questions wrong, but maybe it's in a different topic or a different area, or maybe a test might feel really bad, they might feel like a test section was particularly hard, but maybe it's because they are actually just getting to more questions because they're working more efficiently and getting a better score overall. Having an error log can help them see that, can help you see that. Giving students a reflection template is always helpful. I've found, as I have heard many of my colleagues also say, if you just tell a student to go over their test or review the test, reflect on the test, and nothing else, they don't necessarily know what that means. They may not spend their time doing anything productive. They may not actually do anything. They may not know what it means. They may just think, oh, that was pretty good. I guess that's my reflection. Giving them a template with some either sentence starters or categories to explore, or just ideas of things to reflect on, how to reflect, can help get the information. You can help collect the data that you need to plan next sessions, can help the student see how they're growing, develop confidence, start identifying their own areas of growth. Because while in the short term, we'd like them to improve their test scores, in the future, they're not always going to have us, and they're going to be moving on in life, going on off to college, where they're not necessarily going to have a tutor who can look over all their tests and identify what those patterns are and identify how they can best reflect on their tests that they're getting back so that they can figure out where to improve. This is just a quick screenshot of a template that I use in my own practice. This is for ACT Science. And it's pretty simple. It's pretty basic. It doesn't require a certain number of sentences for students to write, but it's a good way for students to start identifying their own patterns and their own areas where they can improve more. It also helps me plan the session so that I can look at all the questions they missed. How are they spread out? How does the student think about strategy? What sort of areas are they missing? What do they want to cover? What do they feel unsure about? And then what sort of patterns might I not notice until the end of the session after we've gone through the whole test? How can I plan those ahead of time so I can figure out what questions to target, or what strategies, what types of questions would have the most chance of improving their score in the future? I like to have students just make a note of, all the questions they missed, which questions they guessed on, whether it was rushing at the end and had to guess on a bunch or just didn't understand. That can be helpful for identifying patterns. Some ideas of how they felt about strategies. Maybe I gave them a particular strategy to try. I'd like to know how they feel about it, how they felt about time management, and then room for thoughts of their own. My reflection template looks a little bit different for different test sections on different tests, depending on what I'm looking for. Sometimes I'll change a little bit depending on the student. And again, this is helpful for planning future sessions, but also for teaching students how to do this on their own in the future when they're not given a reflection template, as well as just checking in with the student and seeing how they're feeling. Because even if you're doing all the tutoring right, if a student feels like you're not addressing their concerns, or they don't feel like they're making progress, even if you see it, they can get frustrated, discouraged, less likely to put in the work in the future if they don't see that progress. If you can see that in their reflection, you can directly address it. You can talk about growth mindset. You can talk about the progress they are making if they're getting wrapped up in the progress they're not making. One more note. In the template, I also include some examples because sometimes students just don't know what to write. And if you just give them an idea of what they could write, sometimes it helps them get started. I keep them really general though, because I don't want to take the onus of reflection off of them. That doesn't help either. But it gives them an idea of how much they should be writing without giving them really specific prescriptions for exactly how many words they need to have. Another way you can use self-reflection in test prep is encouraging it in the middle of a section. Ask students why, whether they got a question right or wrong. Why did they pick that answer? Why did they think that? You can identify some patterns here that you might not get just by looking at right and wrong answers. Maybe a student is, always or often picking an answer choice on SAT reading that is the answer choice that's overly specific and therefore incorrect. And so maybe you can steer them towards the less specific ones, how to identify level of specificity to distinguish between really tricky answer choices, or ask them, why did they make that careless mistake? What did they miss specifically, so they know what they could do specifically in the future to fix it rather than just be more careful. You can discuss strategies as well as answers. Talking about what the students did to get to the answer can help them reflect on what strategies they know, what strategies are working. If a student gets the answer right, you don't know what process they went through. If the student gets the answer wrong, you also don't know what process they went through. Maybe they tried the right strategy. Maybe they tried the wrong strategy first and then switched to the right strategy, or tried the wrong strategy first and then got stuck. Figure out where along the way they're getting lost so that you can help them get to the right answer next time, and also develop the skills to troubleshoot those challenges on their own. You can ask students to explain wrong answers, even if they didn't choose the wrong answer. This can be helpful for students who are not getting a lot of wrong answers. Students who are scoring 1400s on the SAT looking for a 1500, there are not a whole lot of wrong answers to go over. And so being able to notice when they do miss questions, what do they tend to be about? How do they tend to miss them? Let's say there's a particular type of question that they miss 10% of the time. Find the other 90% of those questions that they did get right and ask them to reflect on what they could have done wrong, or what mistake a student might have made. What's the most common error you think a student might have made, so that they're thinking more deeply about the process, about test construction, about the pattern of answer choices, maybe looking at wrong answer choices. And that can be really helpful for helping the students who just don't have that many wrong answers to go over. You can also have students consider other strategies. If they are getting questions right, but running out of time, you can ask them, what would have been faster? Where could you have saved time? Is there an easier way to do that? They still get the point, whether they did it the hard way or the easy way, but having multiple strategies in mind can help when they are stuck and a particular strategy is not working. Then they have an idea of what else is in their toolbox because they've recently reflected on it, or it can help with time management if they just need faster strategies overall. And the last big topic I want to cover is self-reflection for tutors. We as tutors have many ways that we can reflect in our practice, and this can only help us grow. No one is perfect. There's always room for growth. No one is a perfect tutor. No one has a perfect tutoring session. We do things well. We make some mistakes. Some mistakes are ones that we are aware of right away. You picked the wrong answer choice. You explained the wrong thing. You flipped a sentence around, or you made a mistake. You missed something. But some of the mistakes are longer term and harder to realize. Maybe you've been narrating a particular set of strategies in a way that a student doesn't really relate to it. And so they're just not doing it. They're not annotating the problems. Maybe they just don't feel that it's important. They don't feel like it's helpful. And being able to reflect on that afterwards, being able to look at it afterwards and say, student isn't doing this. What could I have done better to get them more invested in that strategy, whether it's with that same student or even in the future with future students. You can review your plans and compare to the session notes. I'm a big fan of writing things down. My short-term memory is not reliable. My long-term memory, also not very reliable. So when I write down a few ideas of what I plan to cover in a session, and then look afterwards at how that compares to what we did, that can help me see, oh, I spent more time on this than I needed to. Either I didn't have to, or maybe in the future, I should leave more time for that. It'll give me some idea of what to do next time. And I can think about how to plan better and how to make sure that my plans cover the right amount of material and the right scope. And then we just see what my successes and failures are session to session. And then in the longer term, am I often getting to everything I want to or not? And why is that? You can also make a note of individual content or skills that you did not get to in a particular session. It's a quick and easy reflection, but it's something that can make a big difference, especially if you've said to a student, don't worry about that, we'll cover that next time. Or you have in your head, there's a huge gap here, we should get to that. If I did that and I didn't write it down, it would never happen again until the next time a student made the same mistake. And then I'd think, oh, I forgot about that. We'll do that next time, and repeat ad infinitum. If you want to avoid that, just jot down a couple of thoughts. It's really easy to keep a spreadsheet with a sheet for each student where you can write down what you covered and some ideas of what to cover for next time. You're not tied to it. You don't have to stick to it. You may find other more important, higher leverage skills that need addressing, or a student has another issue that needs work. But having that written down, it takes 10 seconds and can make a huge difference in making sure that you cover everything you need to cover. You can also keep track of resources and strategies that did and didn't work for you, for any of your students. If I find a really great worksheet or video that really helped explain something really well, I might put it in a Google Doc somewhere that hopefully I can find again. So the next time I have another student with a similar problem or a similar challenge or in a similar class, I can use the same resource. It'll save me the time of Googling it all over again. You can also do that for strategies. You may find that when collaborating with some test prep professionals, you hear, oh, that's a really interesting strategy. I never thought about that before. Just jot it down so that when you go through your sessions, you have those, you have your toolbox all laid out in front of you, and you can see, oh, student is struggling with this. Maybe they could use that strategy. Maybe that strategy will work better. Keeping track of them in writing somewhere can be helpful for making sure that you don't miss anything, making sure your toolbox is already growing, and even thinking about what strategies can be combined and what can be removed from your toolbox because they're just not working that great. Same goes for unsuccessful things. You use a resource, you use a worksheet, and you find that it has a few questions that are just not the right level of difficulty, or it has some errors on it that make it really difficult. Make note of that. fix it later or pick a new one, but save yourself the effort of having to make the same mistakes over again. You can also journal open-ended thoughts. You can think about what's working, what's not, and that can be with particular students. It can be with particular test strategies, particular content. It can also be with your business or with your own mental health or business management. You might be surprised at some of the things that you learn that you might not have noticed otherwise. You can also ask for feedback from other colleagues, professionals, tutor trainers, to see what someone else might think. And that can be anything from asking someone to sit in on a tutoring session or recording a little bit and sharing it with someone and asking for feedback, or having a meeting with some colleagues and sharing some challenges you've had, share some successes, ask for some feedback on that. Maybe post in the TPAPT Facebook group, hey, I've been having this issue and I can't figure out what to do here. Anyone have any ideas? Or I learned this new strategy and this is really exciting. Does anyone have any thoughts on it? I'm always surprised at some of the incredible things that I learn from colleagues. I don't know everything. No individual knows everything. Everyone has something to contribute. So being able to bounce ideas off of other professionals is endlessly valuable. You can also consider setting goals and revisiting them regularly. And once again, I'm going to say, if I don't write it down, it doesn't happen. It's like it never happened. So I like to sit and set goals. Usually I have a big goal setting session for my own practice at the start of the year, and I write a whole lot of ideas down, and then I try to revisit it once a month. It usually doesn't happen that way, maybe quarterly, but it's helpful to look and see, am I achieving the goals that I set out to? Have I gotten sidetracked? If I've gotten sidetracked, is it something that's working better? Is it time to adjust my goals, or is it time to adjust my practice or my business plans to better fit my goals? You're never tied down to anything, especially in this profession where we have so much flexibility in what we do. Think about whether what you're doing is serving you and how you can do better, how you can either better achieve your goals or reevaluate your goals so that they better fit what your interests, what your strengths, what your values are at that moment. And then last, try and schedule reflection. Make it a habit. If you don't, it won't happen. Maybe make sure that you jot down a couple of notes every single session. For me, it's a spreadsheet. I have a column for what we covered, a column for what I asked the student to do for homework, a column for what things we need to cover for next time. And if I don't do that every single time, immediately after the session, it gets forgotten. I'll tell myself, oh, I'll get to that later. I need to go get something to eat, and I'll remember to write it down later. And I never remember to write it down later. And then I sit down a week later with a student. There are blank columns, and I have no idea what we did the previous week. You can schedule, first of the month, sit and reflect on your greater tutoring practice or your goals. But if you don't schedule it, if you just think, I'll get to it, I'll revisit it regularly, but you don't put it on a calendar or you don't make it a scheduled routine, it's very easily forgotten. I wanted to save a few minutes at the end, and we don't have a ton of time. I want to leave time for Q&A. And so I don't think we really have time to get into some brainstorming, but here are some ideas of things that you can create or write down when you do have a moment that will help you incorporate self-reflection into your practice. And that can include a test or test section reflection template, similar to the chunk of the one that I shared before. A tutor session reflection template so that you can reflect on your own sessions, take notes after a student session. a student session reflection template so that a student reflects on what they've done, either at the end of the session, during the session, or afterwards for homework, or even before the next session. You can have a student program reflection template so that they can reflect on an entire tutoring program as a whole. That's useful for students to remember what skills and content they've learned in the longer term. It's also useful for feedback as a tutor to see what the student thinks they're walking away with. You can think about a tutor program reflection template. If you've come up with either a set class, you're running group classes that are 6 weeks, or you're working with a student for 6 weeks or however long, take some time at the end to reflect on how it went and write up a template in advance. Even just having that blank template sitting there in the folder where you keep all of your materials for that class can help focus the way you do the class, because you're thinking of what you want to get out of it. Then being able to reflect on it can be helpful to your practice and figuring out how to improve and not make the same mistakes next time, and stick with what's working for next time. And then you can also think about reflecting on your business and having a template for regular reflection on your business practices. What's working? Are you making money? Is there something that you can be doing better, more efficient? Is there something that you can be outsourcing to somebody else? Is there something that's working really well and you want to keep doing it? Having a template for each of these areas of reflection can be helpful for making sure that it happens regularly, but also just having that available to get started. Staring at a blank Word document is scary. Staring at a template that has categories can break an open-ended task down into something that feels a little bit more manageable, both for your students and for yourself. We've talked about a lot today. In summary, self-reflection builds procedural skills and mindsets like growth mindset, productive struggle, the how it's done, not just whether it's right or wrong. It also improves learning, strategy use, and academic achievement. Encourage students to reflect during tests, during tutoring sessions, and after and between tutoring sessions. And then lastly, use self-reflection as a tutor. It can help you in the same ways that it can help your students. And now, does anyone have any questions? And you're welcome to unmute and share out loud or plug it into the chat. I see there's one in the chat already. Oh, can I share the Google Slides? Kevin will be sharing the video of this session. I believe he's going to upload it in the next 72 hours. That should be on your TPAPT account page, and you can email him if you have questions about that. But that way you can look back on this information. Anyone else have any questions or comments or ideas of things that have worked really well for you in the past relating to self-reflection that you'd like to share?
Hi, Robin and everybody. Thanks again for another great session. It's great food for thought. I just want to say that I do reflect with my students at the end of our sessions. I ask them, how are you feeling? What was easy for you? What was challenging for you today? So I do that, but I'm really interested in the self-reflections that students could do after having done a practice ACT test, for example. So I listened to what you said, but is it more effective? When would they fill that out? Like after the session that we go over the test section, for example, when is it best that a student reflect on let's say an ACT English section?
I usually have them do it before the tutoring session because it gives them a chance to try it on their own. It also provides me a lot of data so that I can plan the session in advance, even if it's just pulling up the reflection in the first minute or two of the session, and figuring out where we should go, what order, how much time we should spend on things. So I find it helpful that way. It's also useful to reflect after sessions also, but it sounds like you're doing that in discussion, and it seems like you're probably covering that already. So I would suggest after they take the test, I usually have students take a test and then take a break and then come back the next day and grade it and then do the reflection as right after they've scored it.
I see. Okay. I tend to, I mean, I don't do the whole test with them in a session. I tend to go over it with them in class. So would that change the procedure, you think, if I did go over it, the section with them? Would they do that after?
So you give them the section
For homework.
for home.
Right.
Oh, I see.
And then we go over it together in class. So I grade it, they send it to me ahead of time. I score it and then we go over it. So would that change obviously the procedure at that point of the self-reflection?
That's a good question. I think there are a bunch of ways that you could go about that. One way you could do that is to give them a reflection template that doesn't require knowing the score and doesn't require knowing how they did. Just ask a few quick questions of maybe what did you find really hard? What do you feel really confident on? How do you feel about time management, level of difficulty, things they might have noticed, and have them do that before the session. You could also have them do a quick reflection in the session after you've given them their scores back, but before you've gone over it, so that they can look a little more specifically, knowing the questions that they got right or the scores, even reflect large scale on their scores, a few sentences about how they feel about it, what they would like to do next time, what they'd like to cover. And you can even collect them and look them over right in front of them, or you can even have them share their ideas out loud. You can consider, and I don't know how you're doing your sessions, whether it's virtual or in person, but you can have something like everybody write after looking over your scored test, everybody write down one topic that they want to cover on a Post-it note and have them stick their Post-it notes up in the front of the room so that you can get an idea of what the students are interested in covering, see some patterns, see, what they're looking to do. Yeah, there are a whole lot of ways to do it. There's kind of no way to go wrong. And at the risk of sounding really meta, you could try something and then reflect on how it went.
Great. Thank you. No, a lot of food for thought today. Thank you, guys.
Any other thoughts or questions or things that have worked for you in your practice? All right, well, if any questions come up or you have some ideas to share or comments or feedback, I love talking about this stuff and would love to talk about it with you. Please email me at tpaptacademics@gmail.com and I would be thrilled to continue the conversation. I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your week and stays safe in whatever weather you may be having right now. Take care.